Chapter 136, Bronze Dragon Carriage. The sun emitted a dazzling light that pierced into the wild forbidden sea, stirring up waves that surged toward the sky and let out low roars. Before the sound dissipated, the waves fell, splashing up a large amount of black water foam that scattered high into the air, landing on the protective barrier of Xu Qing's magic boat. Xu Qing stood at the bow of the boat and looked at the sea warily. He then performed a series of hand seals. As the protective spirit energy fluctuated, the seawater that contained dense anomalous substances slowly dissipated from the surface of the barrier. Just like the god's fragmented face in the sky, this forbidden sea that surrounded the entire Nanhuang continent would always be a domain of awe and veneration. Not only was it vast and far-reaching, but it was also an eternal mystery in everyone's hearts. This mysteriousness caused Xu Qing to lift his head and stare at the distant sky and the forbidden sea. In his eyes, the two seemed to have fused together at an unknown point. Compared to the vast sea, the boats that passed through the seven blood eyes were like a few feathers that floated gently and leisurely, insignificant. As for the people on the magic boat, it was even more so. Xu Qing fell silent. He looked into the endless distance and the boundless forbidden sea, a feeling of insignificance surfaced in his heart. According to the sea record, most disciples who go out to sea for the first time will feel that they are insignificant. This is a normal change in their hearts. At the same time, they will also produce the thought of conquering the sea. Xu Qing looked at the endless black sea. This was his first time going out to sea and also his first time truly seeing the great sea. However, he didn't have the thought of conquering it. He didn't have any great ideals or vast ambitions. He only wanted to survive in this chaotic world. It would be even better if he could live a little better. Hence, the vigilance in Xu Qing's heart was very intense. Even though he was sitting cross-legged and cultivating, some of his attention was still on guard against his surroundings. Just like that, time flowed amidst the echoing sounds of the waves. This lasted until noon, when waves of commotion rang out from behind, attracting Xu Qing's attention. A hint of sharpness flashed in his eyes as he turned his head. It was 7 to 8 magic boats that came from the direction of the Seven Blood Eyes harbor. They whistled as they approached, causing a commotion. Other than the one at the front, most of them were at level 5 or 6. As for the magic boat at the front, judging from the spirit energy fluctuations, it was about level 8 or 9. It looked rather luxurious. Its entire body was golden and golden feathers were stuck on it that shone brightly. In the black forbidden sea, it was exceptionally dazzling. It was ostentatious and tacky, like a pheasant trying to learn to fan its tail like a peacock. The bow of the phoenix boat should have contained elegance, but under the golden color and luxury, it lost its soul. It revealed a flaunting aura like it was afraid that others wouldn't be able to see. Looking at all of this, Xu Qing narrowed his eyes and drew his dagger. Although the Seven Blood Eyes main city was dangerous and cruel, there were at least some rules. For example, foundation building cultivators rarely attack condensation cultivators in the main city. However, Xu Qing knew that at sea, the strong preyed on the weak. The dangers came from everywhere, be it the non-human races, the human race, fellow sect members, or the forbidden sea itself. If one was unlucky and encountered a non-human foundation building cultivator with malicious intent, their life and death would be decided with a single thought. Anyone could instantly become an enemy. This was especially so when the arrival of these magic boats was too ostentatious, and the voice of the person he hated came from the phoenix boat. The wind on the sea was a little strong, so the voice did not spread clearly. Senior sister, many people are curious about how many spirit stones I spent on this phoenix boat. I'm actually not very willing to answer this question because my answer will cause them to feel defeated. After all, you should have sensed it too. Since I was young, spirit stones have been a worrying that could never be spent completely. Actually, it's so, for some reason, I have been asked for my opinion many times on boat rankings in the sect. They insisted on raising my boat to 17th place. Anyway, I have never cared about these. To me, I don't care how many spirit stones I have to spend on this phoenix boat. What I care about is that it carries my dream. My dream is to be like the phoenix and soar in the sky one day. Senior sister, I hope that there will be a beautiful figure accompanying me who will accompany me to see the scenery, pursue dreams, and share our worries. The source of the voice was none other than the good-for-nothing Zhao Jianing that the captain had mentioned. He stood on the golden phoenix boat, with a young woman in a light purple Taoist robe beside him. This woman was in her 20s and had a moving appearance. From afar, she looked slender and elegant, and her purple clothes were like flowers. However, in the face of Zhao Jianen's words, her beautiful brows furrowed slightly and there was already impatience on her pretty face. At that moment, the sea breeze blew over, and her purple dress fluttered in the wind. She seemed to have noticed Xu Qing, who was on the magic boat in the distance. Under the sunlight, between the boats on both sides, a baleen whale broke through the water surface and soared into the air. A low cry that seemed to come from ancient times rang out from its mouth. It echoed like the sound of a flute, as though it would make everything ethereal. As it landed, water vapor drifted, blocking one's vision. In the woman's eyes, the sunlight seemed to have been separated into 7 colors. The colorful beam of light showed a moment of beauty, reflecting on Xu Qing's Taoist robe and making it impossible to see his face. However, that charm left a deep impression on this woman. This lasted until their magic boat slowly left. Xu Qing stared at them for a long time. After confirming that they were indeed just passing by, he kept the dagger and continued cultivating. Time flowed by, gradually, as the magic boat continued to move deeper. The eeriness and strangeness of the Forbidden Sea were also slowly reflected in Xu Qing's perception. He saw groups of rotting fish. They seemed to have retained their will when they were alive and turned into black pollution that spread under the magic boat. He also saw the terrifying figure of the megalodon. With incomparable savageness, it tore through its prey. Other than that, when Xu Qing passed by some areas, he could sense the deterrence from the bottom of the sea. It was as though it was spreading out at all times, lingering in those areas, and permeating Xu Qing's heart, causing him to be even more vigilant. Even though he had read about this in the sea wrecker and knew that this was the norm when going out to sea, his vigilance was still high. As for the anomalous substances, they were even denser on the Forbidden Sea. It was as though the entire sea was formed from anomalous substances. This caused Xu Qing's shadow to become even darker than before, as though it had turned into ink that flowed on its own. After noticing this scene, Xu Qing didn't hesitate. He directly circulated the suppression power of the purple crystal and suppressed it several times in a row. After that, he calmly stopped and felt slightly more at ease with regards to the shadow. Just like that, the sun was about to set. The first night on sea was about to arrive for Xu Qing. Perhaps it was because this sea area was very close to the 7 blood eyes. Xu Qing didn't encounter too many dangers during the day. Only at this moment, under the setting sun, did some aggressive swordfish appear on the surface of the sea. They leapt up in groups and transformed into arcs before falling into the sea again. Under the afterglow, their green bodies emitted a white glow, giving them a different kind of beauty. Perhaps it was because the Forbidden Sea dragon whale was following the boat. Most of these swordfish didn't get too close to Xu Qing. However, occasionally, a few of them would bump into the magic boat's protective barrier and bounce back into the sea with popping sounds. When the swordfishes crashed into the protective barrier, Xu Qing saw them even more clearly. These swordfish had ghastly sharp teeth and looked very sinister. Their eyes emitted a red glow and were filled with cruelty. Xu Qing waved his hand expressionlessly. Drops of water formed and seeped out of the protective barrier, turning into a buffer so that the swordfish wouldn't be killed by the collision. The sea records warned all the disciples who went out to sea that when sailing in the Forbidden Sea, it was best not to kill too many sea beasts less necessary. This was because the more they killed, the more they would attract the attention of some strange existences in the Forbidden Sea. As for what kind of strange existence they were, the sea records didn't mention it. However, on the first night he went out to sea, Xu Qing didn't cultivate. All his attention was on the outside of the magic boat. Any movement made him incomparably vigilant. According to the sea record's description, the danger level of the sea night was much more dangerous than during the day. On the sea, anything was possible. The sea record also mentioned that because the Forbidden Sea was vast, although danger lurked everywhere, it mostly depended on luck. Some people were unlucky and died in the sea on the first day. Some were lucky and were safe even after being out at sea for a few months. Xu Qing's luck wasn't bad. On the first night, other than the sound of the waves and the whimpering of the sea breeze, nothing strange happened. When dawn was about to arrive, he closed his eyes slightly and prepared to rest his mind. However, at this moment, an extremely intense palpitation suddenly rumbled in his mind like a volcano erupting. Xu Qing's body suddenly tensed up and his eyes abruptly opened. The magic boat's defense was instantly activated to the greatest extent. As he opened his eyes, the forbidden sea dragon whale below the boat also opened its eyes. The dragon whale's eyes were an extension of Xu Qing's senses. The instant it opened its eyes, there was nothing at the pitch-black bottom of the sea. However, there were faint sounds of grinding teeth. Kirk, KRKKK, KRKKK, asked a sound echo. The intense palpitations caused Xu Qing's breathing to become slightly hurried. It was the same as when he heard the singing voice in the Forbidden Zone's jungle back then. The chills seemed to have spread from the depths of the sea to the surface of the sea. This scene caused Xu Qing's expression to freeze and his entire body to tense up. He circulated his cultivation base, and the magic boat instantly assumed a defensive posture. With the help of the dragon whale's gaze, he saw a gigantic humanoid creature in the depths of the pitch-black seabed from afar. This creature's entire body was covered in tentacles. It kept swaying. On his shoulder was a thick iron chain that extended into the distance. One could vaguely see a bronze dragon carriage at the end. This dragon carriage was dilapidated and covered in verdigris, filled with the traces of time. However, the tall carriage was exquisite and didn't lack majestic carvings, causing it to emit the aura of an emperor. At that moment, the giant pulled the bronze dragon carriage and strode away at the bottom of the sea. With every step he took, the sea would stir up and cause waves to spread. It was as though it was only passing through. Also, because the distance was too far, everything Xu Qing saw was very hazy. However, the feeling of palpitations and the sound of grinding teeth still clearly echo in Xu Qing's mind even though he was so far away, causing his entire body to instinctively tremble. His pupils contracted and he was extremely vigilant. It was only when this huge humanoid creature slowly left that the trembling gradually weakened and the palpitations in his heart slowly disappeared. What was that? Xu Qing abruptly lifted his head. His face was pale as he took a deep breath and walked out of the cabin. He stood at the bow of the ship and looked at the sea. In the gaze of the dragon whale, the huge figure at the bottom of the sea had already left, leaving only a blurry outline. At this moment, the darkness before dawn gradually receded between sky and earth, and a hint of light slowly seeped out from the sky. It was like a lit torch that burned the pitch-black seawater, forming clouds that grew increasingly intense and continued to spread. In the end, the entire sky was burned and there was a red glow. This was the light of dawn.